All right. So, everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites, YouTube, Rumble, the list goes on and on. We thank you for that. Please subscribe and share. If you're listening to us on one of the community radio stations, we also appreciate that. And tell your friends and your family so we can get more listeners for that also. We are still in the state of Rhode Island here, and we are interviewing another candidate, doing that candidate spotlight for James Lathrop. He is running for general treasurer of Rhode Island. It's a big position in little old Rhode Island, and James is spending some time with us today to talk about what's going on in that race. So, James, thanks so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's you're right. It is a big position that often gets overlooked, and we need to make some changes.
And go Bulldogs. You did go to Bryant University, which
I
I'm a
did.
Bryant guy too. So go Bulldogs. As we start this conversation, James, can you tell the audience a little bit about you and why you're running for the office of General Treasurer in the state of Rhode Island?
Sure. So I attended Bryant University. I graduated with a degree in accounting. I became a CPA. I worked for some firms. I had my own practice for almost 2 decades. Had an opportunity to sell it. And I have a master's degree. I went back to school. I have a master's in public administration from NYU. Been a business person. My family grew up. We were in the trash business. We had a small farm. We worked hard. Happened to marry a Rhode Island girl. And to get a Rhode Island girl out of Rhode Island takes a lot of work. And I lost that battle, which I'm very happy I lost. I love where we live. And I have a grown daughter who's 25. She's now a school licensed counselor in inner city Philadelphia. She was a social worker in the city. As much as I'm a conservative, I also do believe that we have a responsibility to our fellow human beings. And it's something that I instilled in her. I tried to get her to become an accountant, and that didn't work so well, but she's doing good work, and I love her very much. I paid for school. I joined the Army. I was in the Army Reserves for 6 years. Dad had a limited budget, mom and dad, and I really loved Bryant, so I had to figure out a way to do it. I got into government almost 2 decades now. I've been pretty successful in the communities I've been in. I was the Providence Business News CFO of the Year a couple years back. I received the Goodrich Award from the Rhode Island Public Expenditure Council, a pretty conservative group for work for Rhode Island taxpayers. Typical trade awards from GFOA and those things. And I've always had a great team around me. I have great people. Many of them follow me from place to place. And also many of them are now finance directors in other communities. I really believe that, one of my responsibilities is to train for the next generation. It's not just about me. I always tell them part of my job is to train you to take my seat. And if I'm not leaving yet, I will find you a seat in another community or another state. And I believe in that. So that's a brief background about me.
Yeah, and I know you're doing good work, and I believe it's in North Kingston right now. I know you've taken a little bit of a hiatus to run for a general treasurer. Can you talk a little bit to the viewers that are listening and also the listeners on the radio that are listening in Rhode Island, Massachusetts area about what you're doing in North Kingston right now as we move into the interview?
So when I got hired for North Kingstown, I've been here about 5 years. I'm a big believer in cleaning our own house before we start looking outside. So North Kingstown was a great community. It always has been. It just needed a little bit of help. We've improved fund balance from about 20 million to over 40 million now. We've reduced our OPEB liability, which is our cost for retiree health cares, from 30 million to down to about 18 million. Part of it is being self-employed, I understand the importance of cash. We improved our collection rates from in the 96 percentiles to 99%, which you say it's only 3%, but that's a couple $100,000 a year. We've recovered over $1 million of past due taxes also. That was on the books. We had about 3 million when I came here. We're down to under 2 million now. We've just gotten better. Before we go to taxpayers, I always believe, let's see what we have. I come from that old Yankee tradition, and my father would yell at me, the government's got the hands in my pocket again. How can we stop it? And that's what I do. And we've been very successful here in North Kingstown. In Portsmouth, I was previously.
Mm-hmm.
We were at the time the second community in Rhode Island to get AAA rating by the rating agencies. The time I was there, and it's because of the similar type of work that we did. Like I said, I've been around. I tend to get hired by communities to address specific issues. And I like fixing stuff, and that's part of the reason that I'm running is I think the treasurer's office, needs some adjustments. And I didn't like that it's become a political office. It's become that kickoff spot for a lot of politicians. I tell everybody, this is my last job if I get elected. My wife has already made it clear to me I'm not allowed to run for anything else. I want to be treasurer. I want to do the work of treasurer. I want to be treasurer. I want to, look at the pensions. I want to look at how we manage our cash, some of the smaller programs that we do, the OPEB on the state level. And we also issue all the debt for the state. So, those are all important features. And yeah, you can have good people around you, but at the end of the day, you need to understand what they're talking about. And my opponent, he's a nice enough guy, and he's a young kid with no financial background. He's even admitted that he has no investments, and now he wants to control, 10 billion and about 100 billion total cash that goes through the office. And he talked about being a mayor. I mean, it's a $15 million community. North Kingstown's not my largest community I work for, but we're still about 150 million a year. There's a difference between minor league ball players and those in the majors. And that's why I'm running.
I agree. And we'll talk about that in just a second. I just want to go into the finances of the state of Rhode Island. Governor McKee, who is up for re-election right now, is talking a lot about the state is really come out of the COVID crisis. And I'm not going to go into the talking points. I'm kind of sick of hearing the talking points about that. But, this is due to the American Rescue Plan. Also, the state's going to get that money from the infrastructure bill to build infrastructure. There's talk about now the soccer stadium. God help us if that goes through. And also the Superman building that they're just signing checks to, use money for this. As a state treasurer, is there any way you can work with, God forbid, re-elected Governor McKee and also the state assembly to make sure that even if it's just to speaking out, will you speak out against these projects? Because we're just throwing money away and the state is about to go back down the tubes after this federal money goes bye-bye and it's almost on its way out.
Yeah. I will speak up. And I've been working with Democrats all my life. I'm married to a Democrat, for God's sake. So I've got her vote, I'm hoping. But yeah, in 2020, most people don't realize that the state almost ran out of cash. Not that we were bankrupt, but because they pushed the income tax date back because of COVID coming, cash flow is a big issue. And while we're flush now, there's going to come a time where that money's going to go away and we're going to have empty stadiums and half-built buildings and teachers still who don't have their COLAs. These are the people that were made promises and we're disrespecting them. I know that the only reason that I sit here today because I had great teachers. I had great mentors in my life. My father had an 11th grade education. He believed in education. My sister is a principal at an elementary school in Massachusetts. So I'm going to give a little shout out to her. She's the elementary school principal of High Plains School in Andover, Mass. And while they have a large English second language, they were in the 97th percentile ranking for the state of Massachusetts.
Wow.
So, my family believes in education. My sister is really smart person, really big Democrat, and she still likes me. And, but yeah, those are things that we need to address. And even the economics of it. If pensioners have more money, they're going to spend it locally. And that's going to help the economy just as much as a soccer stadium. And it's going to help the whole state and not an individual community. Those are things that we need to address and understanding those concepts. I think it's something that my opponent really does lack. And I'm going to use that pulpit that I have about financial literacy, some of the programs that we have. I'm a big pusher of what they call Rhode Island Able. It's run by the Treasurer's Office. It allows families and friends to put away money for people with disabilities and not affect their Social Security disabilities. Um, the treasurer's office can help people, but I tell people it's an elected position, but it should not be political. Vote for Lathrop, but at the end of the day, you're voting for a qualified person. You're not voting for a red or a blue or anything like that, because the people who have been in charge haven't done a great job. And if you think they did, and you like where your position is, keep the same. I think it was Einstein who said that's the definition of crazy. Keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. Go ahead, keep voting Democrat, see where it gets you.
Oh God, we hope not. As we keep moving forward into this interview again, James Lathrop, he is running for general treasurer of the state of Rhode Island. And everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you're listening as a first timer, please subscribe on one of the podcasting. Again, if you're listening to us on one of the radio platforms, community radio stations, please tell your friends and family. As we keep going into the interview, you've been on the ground talking to a lot of Rhode Islanders around the state. What are you hearing for them as far as financial issues? Obviously, inflation is the huge thing, but as far as maybe Rhode Island's finances, what are they telling you about them?
Well, I think most people don't understand, one, what the treasurer's office really does. It's not about budgets or taxes. So that's part of the dialogue. So get them an understanding. We don't build schools. We borrow money to give to the towns to build schools. People are living paycheck to paycheck. And not only have they lost hope for themselves, they've lost hope for their children, that they do not see a better life for the next generation. And I think that's very disappointing. And they also don't look at any of the politicians as people to inspire them or inspire to. I grew up in a time where, I make a joke of it and you're a little younger, but Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties.
Yes.
That was my first politician that I saw. He was a Reagan Republican. He still was a nice guy. That got me involved with what I wanted to be. We don't see that anymore. It's so polarizing. And even among my own party, the Republicans, I get many people who say, I'm not Republican enough. I am who I am, and I've got to stay true to that. I have to be honest. People say you talk too much or you give answers. Well, if I just tell you the truth, I don't have to remember what I said. It's easier. Too many people are afraid of offending people. I'm sincere about what I want to do. I'm extremely good, and I don't mean to sound cocky, but I'm extremely good at the finance role. Right. And I think I can make real change, and I bring some outside thinking to it. I was just reading about called a PCC. It's a pension contribution where municipalities can pay in advance and then take a deduction later on so that they can help their retirees get to COLAs a little bit quicker. Those are things that we need to do. We need to manage the funds better, and we need to be transparent. Forbes magazine picked up on my transparency portal. Ted Seidel, who's a pension expert, SEC lawyer, has endorsed me, saying that I'm not just saying I'm going to be transparent. Here's what it means. Every investment agreement is going to be posted online. Every investment that we own is going to be posted online. I'm not going to say 8% of your funds are in hedge funds and 10% are in real estate. I'm going to tell you what they are. And that's been my history. If you look at North Kingstown's website or Portsmouth or any of the other communities I've been, we post every single check online, other than payroll. And if I get the call, like, what's the check for $42 at Socrates Pizza? Are you guys eating pizza on my tax dollar? Like, no, that was a recreation program. At the end of the summer, they bought pizza for the kids. Oh, okay. If you've got nothing to hide, put it out there. Transparency brings good government. You may not like the discussions, but it will make better government.
I want to kick this around. We brought this up a little bit earlier on in the conversation, James, but I want to go more in depth. As I said, my family has some state workers that are retired in there. They were very upset with Governor Raimondo, then Treasurer Gina Raimondo, what she did with the fund. Can you talk a little bit about what you would do in reference to the state pension fund?
So there's multiple parts. So one is it's not one fund. There's multiple plans, but one investment pool. And there's an expression, how do you eat an elephant one piece at a time? And we need to address the pieces from municipal workers to public safeties to state workers and teachers because they're all very different. One is we've continuously changed how we value the pension. People don't know, but it's not a set statement. Just recently, they changed the investment rate of return. They can change the death mortality rates. All these things have huge swings into the pension fund. So I think we need to understand that and always be comparing apples to apples. So if they were promised something in 2011, and now that we're doing better and they change the rules and they get a step backwards, that's not really fair either. COLAs cannot come back fully right now, but can we do partial? I believe we can. You know, I also am a believer in a tax break. We now exempt veterans' pensions from state income tax. You know, I would recommend that the legislator consider a similar program that state pensioners who are not receiving a COLA get some sort of tax break on their pension because they pay taxes on it from the state of Rhode Island. You know, we're hitting them in both ways. We have to understand that what we want may not be accomplished, but we can make it better than it is. Now, there's no adjustment until you get 80%. What about when we get to 70%? Do we get 50% COLAs? At 60%, do we get 25% COLAs? All these factors need to be discussed. One of the issues, if you look at the statements, and I'm a wonky guy when it comes to finances, you know, this is what I do. You know, we take in less money from new contributions that go out every year in our pension plan. It's kind of like what's happening to Social Security. We need to stop that. So while we're making gains in the investments, those gains are going to fund current payments. We need to understand that and make some modifications to those. That's how we're going to approach this problem. You know, our investment fees are, you know, almost 1.9% of our assets under management, almost $200 million. You know, if you were to buy a mutual fund, you would be typically paying about 1.25% as an investment fee. I think for the size, my goal is to drive that down to 1%. Again, that extra money then goes back to the pensioners, go back to the fund, to go back to reinvestments. Now, those are how you do it. Just by making good investments, that's not going to be enough. You know, we've got to look at the whole picture. And I'm one of the few people who have the ability to do that, to understand all the working parts. I've managed pensions. I work with actuarials. Yeah, I'm not always great dinner conversation, but you want me taking care of your money.
So James Mayadiosa said he wants to give the pensioners stipends. What is your opinion on that?
I think that's a bad idea. One is he wants the same stipend for everybody. So someone who's getting an $80,000 pension compared to someone who's getting a $20,000 pension, I believe there should be some equity. It's also a one-time stipend. It doesn't fix the problem. It's what he did in Central Falls. Yes, he took them out of bankruptcy, but they're still eating hamburger helper. They can't afford to pay their bills.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the financial statements, it's, you know, they are building a new school and there had to be special legislation because the community could not even afford to make one debt payment the way every other community does without going into default. Those are scary things. You know, I'm a big reader and I read a book recently and it was actually on the Bryant book club. I'm part of the Bryant book club and it's called Upstream. You know, and it talks about government, talks about schools, and too often we try to solve the results of the problem and not the problem itself. Sometimes you need to go upstream and find out what's causing the core of the problem, and that's where you need to fix it. And that's what stipends would do, is that it's a one-time thing. We're flush with cash. We don't have the ability to do it again.
So you would, and sorry to interrupt, James, but you would accelerate the COLA payments?
I would try to, based on what we have. I would
Okay.
accelerate the COLAs. in a way that's marginal as opposed to nothing and then
Right.
100%. And I'd also look at a permanent tax break for those who are not receiving a COLA so that at least they're getting some relief on the taxes that they pay.
Okay, fair enough. So at least the viewers and listeners do know where you stand on that. I know that's a big issue. There are a lot of people that are involved in these pension funds, so at least they know where you stand on that. Let's end this conversation with a few last questions. I do want to talk about your opponent. He used foreign funds, maybe some taxpayer dollars with the 30 trips that he made as mayor of Central Falls. Can you talk about that? I mean, for somebody to do that, I don't think that makes them equipped to be a politician, never mind a treasurer.
Well, maybe it does make you to be a politician, and that's why you vote for me. I think it was about 50 trips. He did spend about $80,000 of Central Falls money in doing that. Not only did he go, but his girlfriend he took in Central Falls paid for him for that. Um, that's inexperience, and hey, someone offers you a shiny object. I think he looks out for himself. He's looking out for his next position. I think when you look at the Central Falls bankruptcy, that the bondholders were made whole, that these people are extremely sophisticated. They got extremely good yields because Central Falls was in a junk status, and yet he paid them in full, and he took the employees' pensions, cut them, and and eliminate their COLAs. Right away, he's already going to Wall Street. What happens when he gets $100 billion? He's going to have more mileage than air miles than anybody. My first airplane trip was when I joined the Army and I went to basic training. That was the first time I was ever on a plane. I guess I should have run for office if I wanted to see the world. He's over his head. He was supposed to be lieutenant governor. Even the governor said he's not qualified for just sitting in that seat. So as a consolation prize, they said, well, we'll make you treasurer. You can't screw that up too much. There's 90 people there. Well, I'm here, and that's why I'm running, because he's going to screw it up.
Well, you definitely have the expertise, and I do admire you for saying that this is the only position you would want to run for as far as that goes. Most politicians or people running for political office, I should say, won't even say that. So at least voters know where you stand on that. This is not a stepping stone for you.
But if I get elected and reelected in 8 years, you'll see me at a golf course or in my garden. That's about it.
So let's end with these last two questions. What do you hope people learn from our conversation today, James?
I hope that they understand, one, what the treasurer really can and can't not do. It's about managing money. It's not about making promises or social change. And the other part is look for qualifications. Qualifications matter, especially in this position, if any. And that, I've been in government for 15 years and I work primarily with Democrats, and many of them have come out and been very supportive. I received Council 94's endorsement, a union endorsing a Republican. They never do that. 2014 was the last time they did it, and that was for a lieutenant governor role. It shows that many people who I consider have vested interest, and smart people understand the process. And that's what I hope that the voters of Rhode Island do at the end of the day, saying, Jim's going to do a good job by us, and he's not going to take care of all his other special interests. I've made my money. I want to do this.
There's only a few days left before the election. How can people help you guys out? The polls are very close in this race, and for most races in Rhode Island in general. So how can people help you out and get out the vote, volunteer, give you some cash if they can?
Yep. If you go, well, cash is always great. If you go to my website, www.lathrop4FORRI.com. It's right behind me. But one of the things I need is people at the polling sites the day of election to hold signs. I've had signs made up, and I've got some volunteers, but there's 139 polling places in Rhode Island. and it's a long day. And if you've got a couple hours that day, I'll be happy to deliver or sign with you. It's got a little stick or it's got a necklace thing, so you don't even have to hold it. Just put it around your neck and drink a cup of coffee and stand there so that when people walk into the polls, they remember the name Lathrop and they vote Lathrop and they do what's right for the state.
Again, James Lathrop here. He is running for General Treasurer of Rhode Island. Definitely check out more information about him. And again, these polls are extremely close, from governor all the way to treasurer, lieutenant governor, secretary of state. So we're trying to interview as many candidates before the election to try to get the word out there. James, thanks so much for your time today. And we hope to hear from you soon, and maybe it'll be as general treasurer. That's the plan.
If that happens, I'm coming right back on.
All right, James, thanks so much.
Thank you.